Thank you guys all for coming. Welcome to Sunday Inspiration. Today's topic is the courage to be yourself. Rumi, who is a 13th century poet, said, "It's as if a king has sent you into a far and distant land with one task to accomplish. You could accomplish 100 other things, but if you fail to accomplish the one thing for which you've been sent, it will be as if you've accomplished nothing." What is that one thing? It is the discovery and the full delivery of you, of who you really are, authentically you. 20th century poet, mystic poet John O'Donohue said, "May I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more." It takes a lot of courage to live authentically, to make a decision to fully be yourself. Moana, who is one of my daughter's favorite Disney characters, decides to leave the safe and secure home that she has. Her parents try to convince her to conform, to stay on their beautiful little island. But she has a calling within her, a calling to live her authentic journey, her authentic hero's journey. And that calling is symbolized as the calling of the sea, to leave the shore of the safe and secure life that she had, of doing what she was supposed to do, which is take over as the leader of the island. But she had something within her that called her beyond that, to called her to the further shore of her own destiny. Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women, the wonderful book that is now an amazing movie that we just saw last night, was a woman who lived at a time when convention said that women should grow up and get married and have children. And what they were known for is that women were here to be loving, that they were known for their hearts, she said. But she wanted the world to know, and she believed that women could be celebrated for their minds, for their souls, for their creativity. And she had a longing to transcend the limitations of the conventions, of the call to conform of the people around her, so that she could become a writer and an artist. Emerson said, "To be yourself in a world that is trying to make you something else is the most incredible and most important accomplishment there is." Ralph Waldo Trine, who was one of Emerson's students, said, the only truly worthy thing to be is to be yourself, first, last, and always. And of course, Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true," famously said. Ralph Waldo Trine also mentioned that the source of our truest power lies not in the conforming, not in the trying to be like everyone else, but in being true to ourselves. Most people think that to be successful, to get ahead in life, that they need to conform, to do what other people suggest that they should do, to play by the rules. But these ancient and more recent teachers of the 19th and 20th century, more recent teachers than that, and more ancient teachers are telling us that the source of our true power, the source of our true success, the path of our greatest happiness and joy and fulfillment lies in having the courage to be ourselves, to discover the voice within us that is authentic and true. Maslow, who is a famous psychologist of the 20th century, and he's very famous for the hierarchy of needs, said that the thing that the most successful, happy people had in common, and he was interesting as in the history of psychology because he didn't study pathology and what was wrong with people. He was very, very interested in what was right with people, what the most successful, what the most happy, what the most joyful people had in common. And he said that what he found from studying thousands of people was that it wasn't what you might think. It wasn't that they were born to great families. It wasn't that they were brilliant or highly educated. It wasn't that they were wealthy. And it wasn't even that they had great health. But that the one thing that they all had in common was that they always stayed connected to their dreams. They always stayed connected to the part of them that believed that they could have and do and be what they would love. What I call their inner guidance system. There was a related study done on genius and what makes people stay connected to their genius. And genius was defined as the number of modalities and the power with which we integrate information and use it towards creating success or creating a goal. And what the study said was that at the age of 2, 98% of us are operating at the genius level. We are connected to our inner guidance system. By the age of 5, only 20% of us. So 79% of human beings fall from their genius just within the time of how old Paloma is, between 2 and 5 years old. She's 4 years old. And by the age of 20, only 2% of us are operating at the genius level, which means that we're firing on all cylinders in terms of our awareness, in terms of our passion, in terms of our purpose. And he said that the number one thing that disempowers all of us is that we trade in that inner guidance, that connection to our genius, for external approval, for the good opinions of others, for doing what our parents say we should do, what the society says we should do, like in Louisa May Alcott's time, what women should do and what they shouldn't do. And so most people conform. Most people give in to the need of approval of other people, of culture, and they disempower themselves. They cut themselves off from the source of their true strength, which is their connection to their inner guidance, which I also believe is connected to spirit, to the one energy, the one life, love, God, whatever you love to call that. And they trade it in for external approval, and so they disempower themselves. And so what Louisa May Alcott did was, at first, when she started to write, she was trying to be a writer, she would write stories and use her gifts and her genius, and she would change the kind of writing that she was doing so that it would sell. And she would sell popular stories that were not really what she was longing to write about, but she was conforming and giving in so that she could have some notoriety and some success and make a little bit of money actually to support her family who was struggling during the Civil War. And when she actually had her breakout success was when she had the courage to write Little Women, which was really a story about her family, about the pain and the heartache and the tragedy and the triumph and the love and the deep feeling of her family. She lost her sister. Her sister was ill and she lost her sister. And her willingness to go to the same publisher who was convincing her that she should write stories about women who get married and have kids and have pretty things, or different kinds of serial writing that had some kind of drama to it that people could relate to. She finally had the courage to overcome that. She took back her power, and she wrote a book that became something that we're watching a movie about today. It's been remade many times. And that was the source of her power and her genius, was her willingness to be herself. One of the things that Ralph Waldo Emerson said, and actually interestingly, Emerson was very much close friends with Louisa May Alcott, said that imitation is suicide. he said that God will not have his work, and in this case, in that time, we were referring to God as a he, and so it was patriarchal language. That's not my belief necessarily. I believe you can call God he or she or it or Allah or Buddha or Jesus or whatever you want to call God, but I do believe there is a living presence in this world. That God will not have, in this case, his work made manifest by cowards. And what he meant by that is the importance of being willing to be yourself in a world that is trying to get people to conform. And so, a little bit about my journey is that I went to a very good college and worked very hard and had some success, and I developed a calling to make films. And so I went on a path of trying to be a filmmaker, and I went to a very good film school, and then I went to Hollywood and tried to develop that career. And I didn't know the principles that I teach now, and I didn't believe in myself, and I gave up on my dream because I had a dream to write and direct my own films and tell my own stories, and it was very hard to do that. I sold the script, it never got made, and then I got a job in the mailroom of a talent agency, and it felt so very much, again, it was all about conformity and the business of film rather than what I was trying to do, which was tell authentic stories and be myself. And so when it was hard, I didn't have the belief in myself that I've learned to have and also to teach my clients and people to have. And so I gave up on my dream, and then I was lost. And one of the things that happened to me is that I started drinking, and I developed an alcohol problem during that time. And I lost my connection to my inner guidance because I couldn't find a way and a belief in myself to stay connected to my dream. And so I went into the restaurant business. The restaurant business had been a way that I had made a living, and I spent 25 years in that business, and I did create some success, but it was never my zone of genius like Maslow was talking about. It was never my calling. It was never my dream. It was a zone of excellence. I was good at it, but the entire energy of that life was an energy of having given up on a dream. Right? Thoreau said that the mass of men and women live lives of quiet desperation. And that what he wanted to do, what Emerson wanted to do, what all of these great teachers who were teaching us to be ourselves, was to what he called suck the marrow out of aliveness, to live authentically and in alignment with their own unique calling. And so I got lost for a while, and the alcohol was really a symptom of my disconnecting from my inner guidance. One of the principles that I have learned and that I teach is that unlived life will symptomize. When we have a calling to be and do something, and we are not honoring that calling, if we're in a job that is dead, feels dead to us, that feels soul-crushing, if we're in a relationship that feels soul-crushing and dead, that we are longing to change, if we're out of shape and we want to be healthy but we're not taking the steps, life is seeking to express more life through us. We live in an ever upward spiral of becoming. The universe is evolving through and as us. We live in a spiral universe, and our DNA is a spiral. And so we are part of this 14 billion year history since the Big Bang of the evolution of this universe, and that universe is evolving through and as us, and it's evolving through our calling for more life. And so when we squash the calling for more life, and we don't do what we're called to do, it will symptomize. For me, it symptomizes as alcoholism. Sometimes it symptomizes as illness or financial problems or divorce or relationship problems, but it will symptomize until you honor that calling. And so about 21 years ago, I got sober, and I had a spiritual awakening. And I was running my company. I was building a career in the restaurant business, and then about 12 years ago, I had a calling experience, and that calling experience was really something that I had in a spiritual center, which I described in the former talk. And I was told to be a spiritual teacher and to speak the word, to speak spiritual teachings. Right? But I didn't know how to do that. And I had a career, and I was trying to be successful in the eyes of other people. I was conforming to conventions, right? Like Louisa May Alcott was conforming to conventions. I had gone to really good schools, and I had an education, and I wanted to be in business, and then I started to have some financial success, and it was important for me to look good to my peers and to the people who were judging me and saying, where I felt judged by, and say, you see, I'm a legitimate person, I run a business, I'm a leader, right? I'm making real money. You can come to my restaurants and you can see what I'm doing, right? It wasn't my calling, but it was my trading that in for external approval. And so 12 years ago, I had this calling, and it sent me into seminary. I went to an interfaith seminary where I learned all the world's religions and had a new thought spirituality, which is really an integration of all the world's religions, and not about the ritual, the dogma, but more about the spirit of universal spirituality, and that became my path. But I didn't know how to make that real as a spiritual teacher. And then about 3 years ago, after I had built a 25-year career in the restaurant business and built a company for 10 years, a $30 million company, I decided to leave that career to follow that calling. And the first iteration of that calling was to be a coach, a business coach and a life coach, and I've been doing that for about 3.5 years, and that's been very fulfilling. But interestingly, there was still a part of me that was conforming in all of that. Because I was in the business world, I'm in a BNI business networking group with Tom here. I was still a bit in the closet about my spiritual beliefs and my calling. I had learned and become an expert, and I've actually taught people how to speak the language of spirituality and transformation and personal development, not in the religious way or in the spiritual way, but through the use of quantum physics and neuroscience and business development language and psychology and philosophy. And so while those languages are very powerful and they all integrate into the same teachings, I still was in the closet about being a spiritual teacher. Because I had grown up in a family where my mother was spiritual, but my father didn't want any God in the house, right? And all of my peers were business people, conventionally minded people, who were very off-put by spirituality, even though many of them were Jewish of descent or Christian or Catholic or they had a religious background, but they didn't believe in the religions that they were a part of, but they would celebrate the holidays. I remember I was running my company, and we had about 400 employees, and I was giving I was going to give an inspirational talk to our 400 employees, and during the talk, I asked everybody to take a deep breath at the beginning of the talk, because I knew what that does is open people to receive a message, right? I didn't say anything else that was remotely spiritual. And I got approached by one of the executives who worked for us to say that made them feel uncomfortable. Just because I asked people to take a deep breath. It's very interesting, this world that we've grown into, that, religion has lost so many people with its dogma, but people have thrown out the baby of spirituality with the bathwater of sacred, the sacred experience of being one with the spirit of a living God, of the presence of universal energy, of our source. And so it was interesting because that confirmed I have to stay in the closet. I have to not really be myself. And so my life has been a series of what my old mentor, August Gold, would say, bringing more of me more out into the world. And that's what I would suggest to you. I would love for you to ask yourselves this week, how can you bring more of yourself, your true self, your authentic self, out into the world. Some of you may have careers that you love, but there is a creative pursuit that you wanted to express that you've been hiding. Maybe there is a conversation with a loved one that you've been holding back from having out of fear that you will lose their love, you will lose their approval. Maybe you're in a job that you don't love, that you want to change. Maybe you have a business idea, an entrepreneurial idea. I know Tom has a great one that he's working on, right? That you've been keeping in the closet, right? That because you're afraid that it won't be successful or that people will judge you for being weird. People thought it was very weird for me to be an interfaith minister. They thought it was very weird. They thought it was very weird for me to ask people to take a deep breath at the beginning of, talking about how successful our business and thanking our 400 employees for a great year. I was amazed by that, right? It was so challenging to their, separation of church and state, or whatever that, need to stay separate from their spirituality. So it doesn't have to look like a spiritual talk for you. For me doing this today, it's weird. People are like, why are you doing that? Sunday's family day, not that many people are coming yet. Why would you do this? It's because God, or the voice of my inner guidance, is saying, this is you, John, bringing more of you out into the world. And what I believe, and what I want you to hear from me today, is that the more authentically you live your life, the more you're willing to bring more of you more out into the world. As Maslow said, you will return to living in your genius. As Rumi said, you will return to doing that one thing for which you have been sent. We just have found out that our doorman, the gentleman at the front desk, had a loss in his family. I know of lots of people in the last couple of months who have passed, right? Nobody thinks when they look back on their life, when they're on their deathbed, nobody regrets the things they did, right? What they regret is the things that they didn't do. And those things that they didn't do that they regret, and that's a great line by Mark Twain, what they regret is the not being themselves, the not speaking their truth, the conversations they didn't have, the businesses they didn't start, the books they didn't write, the creations, the poems, the paintings, the marathons, the mountains they didn't climb. Being yourself, right, is hard. It's been hard for centuries, for millennia. But it's the most important thing that we can do. We are unique. You are a unique, unrepeatable presence. In the history of humanity, there will never be another you. There will never be anyone with your unique gifts. And if you don't fulfill your potential to give your gifts to the world, then the world will never receive those gifts in that way. The world needs you to be more of you. And the part of you that's afraid, just know that we're all afraid. Just know that everyone you admire, every famous, successful person, you know how they got, for the most part, famous and successful? By being authentically them, right? And the rest of us, even though we admire that, we're afraid to take the risk of really being who we are, because we don't want people to raise an eyebrow, to think that we're weird. But it's your weirdness, it's your uniqueness, it's your authenticity that is your unique gift. As Rumi said, it's the one thing for which you came. So I'll ask you, in closing, to have the courage to be yourself, knowing that being yourself is your one gift that you have to the world, and knowing that as you shine your light most brightly, everything that you want is on the other side of that. More money, more success, more love, more life. The world is waiting for more of you, to bring more of you more out into the world. Thank you so much, and have a good day.